Hello, my name is Janine Turner, and I am the founder of Constituting America. Welcome to our annual academic study. History holds the key to the future. Or as Shakespeare wrote, the past is prologue. This year's study is entitled The Genius of America, A Journey into Our Republic, a study on Alexis De Tocqueville's Democracy in America. The Americans have no neighbors and consequentially no great wars, financial crisis, ravages, or conquest to fear. They need neither large taxes nor a numerous army nor great generals. They have almost nothing to dread from a scourge more terrible for republics than all those things put together. Military glory. Alexis de Tocqueville. This essay is based on the readings from Alexis de Tocqueville's Democracy in America, and the chapter is The Main Causes Which Tend to Maintain a Democratic Republic in the United States. Volume 1, Part 2, Chapter 9, Subchapter 9. Pages 296 through 298, and you can find the exact published rendition of our book on our website, Constituting America. The Way We Were and Could Be Again, written by Danny De Gracia. The Americans have no neighbors and consequentially no great wars, financial crises, ravages, or conquest to fear. They need neither large taxes nor a numerous army nor great generals. They have almost nothing to dread from a scourge more terrible for republics than all those things put together. Military glory. Alexis de Tocqueville. The late Ronald Reagan, after losing his party's nomination for president in 1976, spoke of a time capsule that he had the opportunity to write a letter for that would be later opened for the American tricentennial 100 years later in 2076. Quote, and suddenly it dawned on me, those who would read this letter 100 years from now would know whether we met our challenge, end quote. Reagan explained, quote, whether they will have the freedom that we have known up until now will depend on what we do here, end quote. Reagan went on to say, quote, will they look back with appreciation and say, quote, thank God for those people in 1976 who headed off that loss of freedom, who kept us now 100 years later free, who kept our world from nuclear destruction? And if we fail, they probably won't get to read the letter at all because it spoke of individual freedom, and they won't be allowed to talk of that or read of it. This is our challenge, and this is why we were here in this hall tonight. Better than we've ever done before, we've got to quit talking to each other and about each other and go out and communicate to the world that we may be fewer in numbers than we've been, but we carry the message they're waiting for. We must go forth from here united, determined, and what a great general said a few years ago is true. Quote, there is no substitute for victory, Mr. President. History both repeats and rhymes, and the challenge and battle that Reagan had spoke of for the soul and future of America is the same struggle that every American has been fighting since the shot heard around the world on April 19th, 1775, and maybe even earlier. In the early decades of the United States of America, this country was a marvel to philosophers, historians, and political observers the world over, one of them being Alexis de Tocqueville. The old world had its share of political revolutions and political experiments. and the search for a system of government that balanced the individual's pursuit of happiness against society's need for cohesion and order had been tried and failed numerous times over. More often than not, the rulers of the old world brought about political reform through palace intrigue, bloody revolutions, and military takeovers, often offering platitudes of liberty and freedom and justice to distressed citizens, but ultimately never granting a system that allowed people the space to be human inside a government restrained enough to not be oppressive, but still maintain the basic functions of a sovereign state without becoming a failed one. Quote, "Meet the new boss, same as the old boss," end quote, was the way that rulers and systems of government had come and gone for millennia up to the founding of the United States of America. Certainly, the ancient Greeks had their experiment in democracy, but that was a system that was at best superficial and did not empower people to pursue and enjoy individual freedom in the way we today think of the revolutionary American statement that all men are created equal, end quote. In fact, the lessons of the Peace of Westphalia Treaty were still very much on the minds of European leaders at the time of the American Revolution. The treaty established the understanding that the lowest common denominator in the world system is not the individual, but the state itself, and that rulers have the right to be sovereign inside their national borders, a concept which, interestingly, lives on in the text of today's United Nations Charter. This idea that the king is the state, and the state is the king, and everything and everyone under the king belongs to the king, who is, like the ancient Pharaoh of Egypt, the morning and the evening star, was upheld by the Peace of Westphalia. Many of the ancients, though they resented it, likely felt and understood this was a necessary evil. The Bible gives us the story of Moses spending time collecting the 10 Commandments on a mountaintop, while his brother Aaron is left behind with the presumably millions of Israelites who had been rescued from Egypt's bondage by divine deliverance. The people organized the equivalent of a democracy in the absence of Moses, pressured Aaron to build a golden calf as their national icon, and began to ravel and cast off all restraint. That is, until Moses came back with the power of God to put them in their place. This idea that if people are allowed to have their way, they'll use it to do evil and wreak chaos on a national and even international scale has persisted throughout human history. The purpose of the king, who is either there because a god chose him or because he is the bloodiest, wisest, or richest person able to assemble and control the resources needed to maintain a state, is essentially under this line of thought to keep the citizens in line and to keep the neighboring countries in line as well. When we read De Tocqueville's Democracy in America, we can therefore see the European alarm and fascination that America, at least at the time, was a political unicorn. Here, De Tocqueville finds Americans govern themselves and don't require a police state to keep them in line. Here, the heads of state, local leaders, and public servants are anodyne, mostly agreeable individuals who dare not step out of line lest they face the wrath of the public. In short, Americans have a functioning democracy because they can handle it. Quote, to submit the provinces to the capital is therefore to put the destiny of the whole empire not only in the hands of a portion of the people, which is unjust, but also in the hands of people acting by itself, which is very dangerous, end quote, de Tocqueville wrote. Quote, I already said before that I saw in the origin of the Americans, in what I called their point of departure, the first and most efficacious of all the causes to which the current prosperity of the United States can be attributed. Americans had the chance of their birth working for them. Their fathers had long since brought equality of conditions and of intelligence onto the soil they inhabited, from which the democratic republic would one day issue as from its natural source. This is still not all. With a republican social state, they willed to their descendants the most appropriate habits, ideas, and mores to make a republic flourish. End quote. One will likely read de Tocqueville in 2024 and seeing the condition of the United States easily say, quote, ouch, he missed it. We missed it. And what a height we've fallen from, end quote. The very things that allowed America to be a successful democracy at the time of de Tocqueville's writing of, quote, Democracy in America, end quote, are the very things that are absent in today's country. Increasing urbanization by design means that people today are packed together in tight, uncomfortable, competitive built environments. This is the opposite of the pastoral, agrarian, mostly relaxed America that de Tocqueville wrote of, with agreeable citizens and family structures that were personal, instructive, and a form of self-government. Want to feel democracy has failed? Work in downtown Honolulu, Hawaii, and just try to leave your office for a 45-minute lunch break. Trust me, if you don't get a traffic ticket for a simple mistake, get run over by a distracted driver, collide with a pedestrian disobeying the crosswalk signal, or get stuck in a traffic jam due to some wild accident for 2 hours, then you must have the very blessing of God himself operating in your life. This is a daily experience which embitters citizens and makes individuals reliant on big government to fix, regulate, or control the increasingly out of control world around them. Here in Hawaii, we have no shortage of public, quote, planners, end quote, yet the local chaos here is out of control. Does democracy as a system of government work? Technically, yes. Technically, no. It works if a majority of those voting are enlightened, altruistic, and at peace with themselves and others. It doesn't work when they're not. And that is why America in 2024 is the exact opposite of what de Tocqueville described in Democracy in America. Today, we're fighting world wars no one wants to admit are world wars. Our young people are tearing apart college campuses and have a political divide that is night and day from their parents' view of the world. Our government is bigger than it's ever been before, but it can't maintain order. We're taxing people way beyond what drove the founders to rebel, but every politician and bureaucrat says they need more money and can't even cut the grass or keep the roads paved because there's no money for that. And depending on which of the two major parties one subscribes or aligns with, one may see two totally different directions and purposes for the future of America. Oh, if we could only go back to de Tocqueville's time when times were simpler. We can, in fact. Despite all of the disruption, decline, and major changes in history, America's experiment is still at its core a system of inputs and outputs that, when operated properly, will work the way it was intended for limited government and maximum individual freedom. De Tocqueville's America, at the time of his observation, emphasized a connection to one's family and to one's community. When we are able to know each other and keep each other accountable, we can solve things by cooperation or by negotiation amongst ourselves. That is the beginnings of self-governance. I often ask myself how many people would be out protesting in the streets or being vicious and disagreeable over abstract political ideas if they had someone back home who loved them and helped them and kept them grounded with supportive words and kind loyalty. De Tocqueville also encountered an America that did not see or rely on national government as the source of their solutions. Today, we want a quote from the president and the Speaker of the House and the Senate Majority Leader on every little thing that happens in the world and what their plan is. When Americans took initiative and took action on the things they had within their personal sphere of reach, politicians were largely obsolete. Today, we take minimal responsibility for things and seek to be as unaccountable for our actions and others as possible. De Tocqueville's America was proactive and ready to take charge. They had peace because they had initiative. And most importantly, de Tocqueville saw an America that had traditions that clearly established lines between moral rights and wrongs. Quote, "In the United States, religion not only regulates mores, but extends its empire over intelligence," end quote, he observed. Today, we have been encouraged to be narcissistic, avoidant, and mercenary in our actions. The concept of, quote, your youth, your vibes, or your tribe that has been promoted in recent years suggests a man or a woman can be an island who does whatever is right in their own eyes at any given time with no accountability to anything or anyone except their own gratification. Multiplied to a population level, this kind of thinking is disastrous and results in exactly the kind of society we have that is at war with itself. There is a war against moral clarity in America today that brings out the worst rather than the best that democracy can offer. Quote, "It is likely," end quote, Benjamin Franklin said at the 1787 Constitutional Convention, quote, "to be well administered for a course of years and can only end in despotism as other forms have done before it, when the people shall become so corrupted as to need despotic government," end quote. Take that not as a prophecy that cannot be avoided, but as a warning that must be heeded. America is at a dangerous precipice in 2024. We are headed away from the enlightenment that de Tocqueville and others marveled at, and are going backwards in time to the traditions of upheaval, reactionary despotism, and ultimately total decline. We can't turn back. It will take changing our communities, changing our cities, and most importantly, changing ourselves. This essay was written by Danny De Gracia. Danny De Gracia is a political scientist and internationally published author who lives in Hawaii. He is currently working on his second master's in health policy at the University of Hawaii at Manoa.